Welcome to Auntie Life Unfiltered, the podcast where we say the things everyone else whispers, feels, or pretends they're totally fine about. Around here, nothing is too awkward, too messy, or too, oh my god, did she really just say that? Yes, I did. This is your space where real talk, real stories, real emotions, and the kind of honesty that makes you laugh, cry, and heal a little. Sometimes all at once. So grab your drink, get comfy, and let's dive in. Because life's too short to sugarcoat it, and I'm not here to do that anyway. Welcome to Auntie Life Unfiltered. Let's get into it. Today's episode is an important one. We're talking about grief, loss, and something that doesn't get enough space. Grief from a father's perspective. My guest today is Jason, the creator of Letters to Zachary, a community born from unimaginable loss and turned into connection, honesty, and a safe place for people, especially men, to grieve out loud. This conversation may be heavy at times, but it's also real, human, and full of heart. If this topic makes you feel close to home for you, please take care of yourself while listening. Jason, thank you for being here and for trusting this space.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get into some of the heavier stuff, do you want to tell us a little about you and your current life, family situation, what you do for fun?
Sure. I'm a married father of two kids, both with a whole host of medical disabilities. Um, my son and daughter, even though they were born 2 years apart, they had identical medical conditions outside of the fact that my son had a rare condition on top of everything else. This year will be 23 years of marriage, if I did my math right. Outside of there, I'm pretty much a homebody. I work for Chick-fil-A, so
Okay, nice.
most people are very familiar with that company. So I work for them, and most of my time's just spent with family, spent with my daughter. Just doing the things that she likes to do day in and day out.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, I think almost all of us know Chick-fil-A. So I kind of live in a rural area, but I'd say about 7, 8 years ago, we got one within driving distance. So it's nice. And I know that they're usually pretty good in the community and with giving and
Yeah.
for charities. So that's an awesome organization. Before you worked for Chick-fil-A, you did say that you worked as a stay-at-home dad and a full-time medical
Mhm.
caregiver. Can you give us a little information on how that was for you?
Sure, certainly. When my wife and I got married in 2003, we were a little older in the sense of, I was in my late 20s, mid 20s, she was her late 20s. And so we knew that once we got married that we were going to starting a family relatively quickly after we got married. Because my degree's in education, so I taught for 9 years before I left to be a medical caregiver. And so I always worked on the elementary level. So it was always kind of decided that if one of us stayed at home, it was going to be me anyway, because that was kind of the age I dealt with day in and day out, at least in the beginning. And so when we found out about all of my son's issues, I still taught for probably 2 years after that point, and it was finally that last year, which was 2011, we were in and out of the hospital so much that it just got to a point to where I'd blown through all my personal time and my PTO, and I was essentially working for free, that we were just like, you know what? You're not making a paycheck as it is, so we might as well stay at home, and then we can be in a little bit more comfortable
Right.
situation. And so it was the other reason why I stayed at home was because I did all the physical medical procedures. I did all the lifting. I did all the specialist doctor's visits, the hospital stays, the school meetings, the everything associated with that. So that was the kind of the other reason why I stayed at home. But for my kids, it was more my son that was medically fragile. He was the one that was always in and out of the hospital, and he had some pretty serious urological issues. He had some pretty serious respiratory issues that he dealt with, and so a lot of the physical stuff I did was, um, like, for example, I'm the room he had, I'm in currently, and you can't see, but the wall I'm facing used to have shelving on it, and I think I had 6 or 7 respiratory machines that were sitting up on shelves that I knew how to use and when to use them and kind of what order to use them in when he got sick. So, life as a medical caregiver was essentially um, going from one procedure and one medication to the next.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yes, and it takes a very strong person to do that, and obviously you had no choice, and that is your child, but that is a lot to go through. So, how did those years shape you as a father and as a man?
Um, it now I didn't realize it in the moment just because, it was a lot of, trial and error in the
Hmm.
beginning because, like, for the first 5 or 6 years of my son's life, we were literally in and out of the hospital every 6 months, and what they don't tell you as a parent of a special needs child is, sure, they'll tell you, like, for example, if you have, say, a Down syndrome, you know what all the primary issues are of Down syndrome, but they don't tell you what the secondary issues are of Down syndrome that could either greatly change how their health is one way or another.
Hmm.
And so that first 5 or 6 years, there was a lot of, learning signs and, what affected my son and what got him sick and what didn't get him sick. And it was a lot of that I learned, which then, like, my son was very laid back, nothing bothered him, and he lived a very medically hard life, and so that kinda taught me that, we can you can get through anything, and but the steps forward don't necessarily have to be large steps.
Hmm.
As long as you're moving forward, even if it's a millimeter at a time, you're still moving forward, is
Yeah.
kinda what that life taught me.
I'm sure, yeah, that's a lot, and it's a lot of constant changes, and like you said, learning new things, and there's so much that is a symptom of a symptom, and so much that goes with, I'm sure it was endless the amount of things that were always changing, and different things that you had to learn and do. So that does take a lot. If you're comfortable, can you tell us about your son and what happened?
Sure. So I'll give you the easy breakdown of his issues. So my son was born with severe neurological delays, meaning that the year that he passed, he was 15, but he actually functioned about 6 to 8 years old, somewhere in that ballpark. He was born nonverbal, meaning he couldn't when he got sick or hurt, he couldn't tell me what was going on. I had to figure it out. And I got to a point where I could read his nonverbal cues and his body language so well that I could almost tell he was getting sick before he got sick,
Mm,
is
yeah.
how well I just kind of learned him. So he had neurological issues. He was nonverbal. After about the first year of his life, he developed epilepsy, meaning he had seizures. He could walk with assistance. Like, I could put my hands up under like his armpits and walk with him, but could he walk on his own? No, he needed a wheelchair for that. And then he had his rare condition, and the easiest way to explain that is he was born without any core abdominal muscles. Like, he had no abs. He had an abnormally large bladder that had to be given a catheter every 4 hours because he didn't get the sensation to have to go to the bathroom on his own. Uh, because he didn't have the core abdominal muscles, he had issues on the other end going to the bathroom that I had to medicinally assist him with. Um, and then the reason why he had a lot of respiratory issues is because whereas you and I have the abdominal muscle to be able to build pressure to, like, cough stuff out, he didn't have that. And so if I didn't catch it with a machine fast enough, I knew we were going to the hospital, we were going into the ER, and we were going to get admitted for, a 7 to 10 day stay, which was kind of his average. Um, is is what we dealt with every 6 months. So, remind me the question again.
Oh, just kind of what was going on with your son, and
Oh,
led up to his passing.
that's kind of what life was for the majority of his life, and then 3 days before he actually passed, he and his sister got home, and I did my normal routine because they're both in wheelchairs. So the Lyft bus would get to the house, and I'd bring them both in. I'd get them out of their chairs and get them in their kind of their lounge wear and give them a snack and that kind of stuff. And so I fed both of them that night. I put his sister down first to bed, and then I normally kept him up about an hour later just to give him some one-on-one time with me and his mother, because I love his sister and my daughter, but she can be intense. And
Yeah.
even he would kind of, even in his nonverbal way, he would just look at me and go, I need a break from her.
Yeah.
And so, plus she was younger and she needed the rest anyways. So that night we brought him into our bedroom. We watched TV with him for a while, and then we went to go brush his teeth, and he threw up that night, which didn't really surprise me. We just figured that we used electric toothbrush for him that he liked because of his sensory issues. He liked the vibrations.
Mhm.
And so I looked at my wife and said, well, maybe you just went a little too far back and you hit his gag reflex and something came up. I didn't think much about it. Now, my son's always been a very good sleeper. And then that night he was literally up and down all night long. And at the time, I was still a stay-at-home parent, and that next morning, I texted his teacher because he was in a self-contained classroom, in a special education classroom. And so I messaged her and said, "Hey, I'm keeping Zachary home. I think he's coming down with something. I don't know if it's contagious, and I don't want to spread it to the classroom,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna keep him home." And so she was great and wonderful. "Okay, wonderful. We'll see you tomorrow." And then that next day, something was off, but I couldn't tell what it was. And like all throughout that next day, I kept telling him, like I would put him on the couch that he would normally sit on. I go, buddy, you can take a nap. It's okay. You're not missing anything. Daddy's just going to be on his laptop. It's not like I'm doing something that you want to do. And he absolutely refused to fall asleep, didn't want to drink, didn't want to eat. And even that didn't really strike me because I thought, well, if I'm coming down with something, I don't really want to drink or eat either. And so I told his mother, I said, it's okay if this is one day, but if this starts going into the next day, then I'm gonna start getting concerned because then I know something will really be up.
Mhm.
Well, that first night, that was a Wednesday. Then it was Thursday. He refused to eat and drink, and so that night we put him to bed the same time as his sister. He immediately got quiet, and we just figured because at that point he'd been up for like 30 hours or something ridiculous. And we figured he was just exhausted. He fell asleep. He'll wake up, we'll sleep this off and we'll see how he's doing in the morning. So the next morning we get his sister up, and I look at my wife and I went, I'm going to keep him home one more day to be on the safe side because it was a Friday. And I said, if he's not feeling well, at least we'll have the weekend for him to kind of recover.
Mhm.
So we send his sister off to school, and then about 9:30 that morning, I walk into his room, the room I'm currently in, and I walk around to the other side, and the listeners won't be able to see it, but in the screen that we're looking at, there's a bed behind me, and I went around to the other side. And usually when I would come to get him up, he would clap and get excited and bounce in his bed and get all just, he would get animated. And I walked in here and he was awake, but he wasn't necessarily lethargic, but he just kind of, it was like he was looking through me and not at me. And I came around to his right side and I noticed there was a dark green streak of fluid coming out of his mouth. And I look at my wife and I go, I don't know this is out of my medical wheelhouse, but that looks like bile, and why is bile coming out of his mouth? Something is really not right. So I get him up and he's really floppy, like he can't hold himself up, and I take him out in the living room and I go through kind of my mental medical like checklist in my
Mhm.
head. And I start, how's this doing? How is he reacting to this? Do I need to give him a catheter because of his bladder? Is something going on down there? And I ran through like 7 or 8 different things, and his bladder was okay. He wasn't running a fever, but something wasn't right. So after everything was done, I looked at my wife and it was honestly just a hunch. I looked at her and said, I'm getting him dressed. I'm driving him to the hospital. Something is wrong. So I live outside of Atlanta and the children's hospital for me is 60 miles north of me. So I get him in the van in his wheelchair and I'm doing 90 miles an hour up there because I don't know what's going on. And as we're driving up there, the whole time I'm snapping at him, going, "Buddy, stay with me. Don't fall asleep. Don't do the kind of like when someone gets a concussion, you don't
Mhm.
want them to fall asleep because of the effects that it could have." And he kept kind of fading in and out, not like alive and not alive, but like you could tell he wanted to fall asleep. I was just like, "Buddy, stay with me. Stay with me." He couldn't get comfortable the whole time we were driving up there, and so I park in the parking deck and I lift him out to get him in his chair, to like roll him up to the ER. And he's really like, full, like he can't hold himself up. And this catches my attention. So I go up into the ER and they let me in the ER and I skip the line. And like the security guard walks up to me as if to say, you need to get in line. And I literally look at him and go, he's not breathing. I need help immediately. And so the nurse comes over to me, she looks at him and she goes, "Follow me." Now understand, I've been in this hospital 100 times
Mhm.
and we go at a full run back to the ER, like as fast as we could get back there. And we get him in a trauma room and I instinctively get him out of his chair and put him on like the table that's back there. And I back away in hopes that they'll let me stay in there because he's nonverbal. He can't tell me what's going on. And even if he were, the state in which he was in, he wasn't talking anyway. So they, they kept me in there because I could at least say, this is what was going on. This is how long this has been happening. And so I backed out of the way and, they came like ants off an anthill. There was like 30 of them that came out of nowhere. They immediately cut off his clothes. They start, they put a tube down his throat to intubate him to get like air into his lungs. They start chest compressions. I mean, to a normal person, it's a very serious scenario. And I'm watching it and it's just not registering to me at this point because I'm so focused in the moment of, this is what I need to tell the doctor. This is what's been going on. This is what. And so the doctor comes over to me and goes, down to the minute, how long has he been this way? And I said, plus or minus 5 minutes, he's been this way for this long. Okay. She goes off, barks orders at him. She comes back to me and she goes, explain to me the scenario as to why you brought him up in here. And so I tell her the scenario and she starts barking orders at him and they start doing, and right after she does that, they start doing CPR on him. And even though I'm seeing this, it's still not registering in my head of this is a very serious situation. This is going downhill fast. And they do that and they're doing CPR for a good 5 minutes at this point. And I'm watching the monitors and I'm not seeing a real big change in the monitors up there. And they get the paddles out and they put them on him and I hear him yell clear. And just like a medical drama, they hit that button and he like raises off the table. And I instinctively go to watch the monitor and it literally goes boop and goes right back to what it's doing. Now in my brain, I'm going, he's not coming back, but it's still not registering in reality of what's happening in front of me because I'm so focused on what is everybody else doing? What is the doctor doing? That kind of thing. Well, as time goes on, they shock him probably 4 more times and it's still the same result, same result. And so the doctor finally comes over to me and goes, I could shock him again, but she goes, I think the result's going to be the same. It's your decision. And I said, well, this is out of my medical wheelhouse. If you feel like it's necessary, do what you need to do. And I don't remember. I think they shocked him again. I can't, that's one of the few details I can't remember. But so soon thereafter, she walks over to me and she pronounces them right in front of me. And, I'm sorry for your loss. And so there's another trauma room where the door is open. So I walk in there for a second and I literally have a moment for about 30 seconds. Like I'm crying for a minute, and then I immediately compartmentalize it. And in my head, I'm going, I've got to call his mother. I've got to call, because at the time she was working at the house, working from home remotely. So literally, my wife, when I brought him up here, thought, well, he's going to get admitted. We're going to be here for our standard 7 to 10 days, that kind of thing. I'm just saying, hey, we're being admitted. We're in this room. When you get a chance, come up to this room. I have to call her and tell her that her son's dead on a table. And so I call her. And I tell people all the time, I said, this is what I said to her, and it sounds rude, mean, but I knew the state of mind she was going to be in. And so I told her what happened. I'll never forget the sound that she made when I told her that. And then she regained her composure for a second, and I said, I just want you to be quiet. This is what I want you to do. Message your boss, clock out of work, call your parents, have them drive you up here because you don't need to be driving. I'm in this room. I will see you in an hour. And I did that because I wasn't thinking straight, but I was compartmentalizing at that point, and I knew she wasn't. So I was just like, you need clear, concise directions to be able to get up here. And so that's why I did that. And so they were driving up there. So after everything had happened, I was literally sitting in an ER trauma room with my son who had just died right before my eyes. And I was sitting there, I was talking to him and, just holding his hand and all that. And um, I tell people all the time, I said, one of the things I don't know why it surprised me, but I said, the speed in which my son got cold, that it's a weird thing to remember, but it was incredibly fast after he passed away. And so I'm in there and I'm talking to him and, daddy loves you. And, I know you're going to heaven. Don't feel bad that you're walking that way. It's okay. This is a natural. And I kept saying to him, like, this is a natural thing. As much as it hurts me, this is what you're supposed to do. Almost to give him reassurance to go, I know you don't want to leave, but whatever your purpose was here, it's done. You're being called home based on our faith. And so it's okay to walk the direction you need to walk, is what kind of what I said to him. And then the care team comes in like any hospital, and she goes, is there any questions that I can answer for you? And I said, now, at this point, I rapid fire off like 20 questions, literally back to back to back to back, all to her, because I literally looked at her and said, the thing that will help me right now is information. And I said, this is going to sound cold and callous, and I don't mean for it to be. But I pointed to my son and I said, I will deal with the emotion with that in a minute. What I need is information from you. And she goes, well, what do you need to know? What happens from here? Is he going to the morgue from here? Are you doing an autopsy? If you are doing an autopsy, what's the reason for why you would do one? If you're not doing one, why are you not doing one? If you are doing one, what's the turnaround time? What information do I need to have to give the funeral home so I can get them home? And I rapid fired questions to her. And she said, well, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to talk to the coroner to see if he wants to do an autopsy. So she comes back 10 minutes later and she goes, he's decided he's not going to do it. And I said, why? Why is he not going to do an autopsy? And she goes, well, your son has an extensive medical history and he's just going to relate this to something related to his medical history. And she goes, plus in a children's hospital, the main reasons why we would do an autopsy is either abuse related, drug related, or the court or criminally related. Other than that, she said, we don't typically do autopsies in a children's hospital. And I said, okay, I understand that. So my wife and her parents get there and we have our moments for a while and then we leave. And then the last thing I'll never forget was I tell people, I said, the hardest thing I ever had to do was I had to leave them in that trauma room. I had to take all of his cut off clothes, put it in his empty wheelchair, and wheel that through the hospital. I then had to put it in the van, and my wife rode home with me, and her parents went back to their house, and we drove home 60 miles in dead silence the entire way home. And so I tell people all the time that was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. So, but uh, ultimately, what it came down to, what's on his death certificate, it is sepsis and cardiac arrest due to sepsis. The best I could fit, because I got the ER notes after the fact, and the best I can tell is he got an infection somewhere. It got way out of hand. And by the time I caught it, it had turned into sepsis. It got into his bloodstream. And even the doctor at the hospital said, if he were to get sepsis in the hospital, the fatality rate in a hospital is like 70%. Once it gets in his bloodstream, she said it skyrockets to like 98%. It's ridiculously high.
Hmm.
And she goes, she was good. She was just like, there's nothing you could have done any differently than what you did. Unfortunately, the results would have probably been the same. And so that's kind of what happened.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. That would be incredibly difficult. And as you said, I think your brain was just so used to being on go and making sure everything was taken care of. And, you knew if you would have let yourself think about everything else, you wouldn't have been able to focus as much on that and get the things and information you needed at that time. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Well,
What were those first days and weeks like for you emotionally afterwards?
um, for me, the first time it really hit me was when we got home that day. Um, well, see, my daughter was at school. Now, my daughter has the same developmental delays as nonverbal, so trying to explain death to her was difficult because she didn't really grasp the concept of, someone dying and passing away and never being able to
Hmm.
physically see them again, kind of thing. But we got home from the hospital. Like I say, I'm in his room, and you probably can't see it, but in the back corner behind me to my right, I brought his wheelchair in here, and that wheelchair's been parked there since the day he passed away. I have not moved it. And I came in this room and I looked at his empty bed, and the stain from the bile was still on it. And it was at that point that everything I was compartmentalized, like it ran me over like a Mack truck. Like my knees buckled, and I just was inconsolable for a few minutes. And I gained composure and all that, and we drove over to my parents' house because my whole family was over at my parents' house. And we got over to my parents' house, and I walked in the door. And, my brothers and I are close in the sense of, are we best friends? Like, do we hang out all the time? No. But I walked in and I saw my eldest brother, and I don't know what it was about it, but I walked into my parents' room, and like I lost it. I'd never done that in front of him. It's going to be a man thing to say, but I never really showed weakness in front of any of them. And when I saw him and all of them, like I buckled, and I regained composure, and I sat down in the living room, and that was probably the longest conversation because I knew I needed to tell them that, but like when you're really emotional, you get to talk and all of a sudden you feel that quivering feel like you're going to break down. Like about every 30 seconds I was talking, I was feeling, so I'd have to pause for a second. And so I got all that out, and then we went to the funeral home, and my wife's parents came with us because unfortunately they'd had a relative that had passed away recently, so they kind of knew what the process was, and so we wanted them there just to make sure that the funeral home was doing what they said they were going to do, and like they weren't trying to pull one over on us, so to speak. And which I'll give them credit. The funeral home was great. They were, despite the situation, they were great. So we did the funeral home, and we got the information. We told them, we said, we will make a decision tomorrow. Can we make an appointment for tomorrow? I can't make it today because my son passed away 4 hours ago. And they were great. And so we came back the next day and made that decision. And I'm one of those people when I get in a very high stress, I tend to use humor to get through it.
Yeah.
So that next day we were making, they say you have the worst day of your life, and now you've got to make 1,000 decisions on what you want to do. So we decided that we were going to have my son cremated and what would the urn we were going to put him in and all that kind of stuff. And so when we decided we were going to have him cremated, the funeral director comes over to me and my wife and he goes, "I'm required to inform you that the federal government," and I went, "Stop." I said, "What does the federal government want anything to do with my son's cremation?" And he goes, "I'm required by law to tell you, per the federal government, that you need to understand that the state in which your son enters the crematorium will not be the same physical state in which he leaves the crematorium." And I look at him and I pause for a minute and I went, "Excuse the language," but my actual response was, "Who the fuck does it? It's fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very hot fire. Who thinks that they can return their loved one to the state it was before being in a fire?"
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it. The funeral director, he doesn't say anything, but he looks at me. He just gives me this look of, "You would be surprised at how many people," and I had to shake my head and I went, "But it's fire.
Yeah.
It's like throwing a log on in your fireplace. There's ash afterwards. You can't reform the log once it's done."
No.
And so, we did that, and the funeral home was great and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that those were kind of the hardest moments. Was, when I saw my whole family, and then just it was those moments being alone and just all the things that reminded me of my son, because it's not good or bad, but my relationship with my son versus his mother's were two completely because I was the caregiver.
Mhm.
I was always around him. I was always in the hospital. We were thick as thieves, if you will, because when he was in the hospital, I got admitted with him. I was there every day he was there. I got discharged with him. I never left his side. And even my wife would tell you, in the sense to say, y'all were like this, y'all were, partners in crime, because you had such the closer, because I had to be because of his medical issues.
Mhm.
And like for a year and a half afterwards, I grieved very hard for probably a little longer than normal, at least in that initial stages of grieving.
Yeah. That was your everyday, that was your norm, as you said, you were with him through everything, and that was what your whole waking day was for, living for your son, so I can't imagine, what that would be like having to be without him afterwards. That is a lot. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us. What do you think people most often get wrong about how men grieve?
Um, I think, well, it's men and women, but more so men. There's this idea that there's a time limit on it. Um, More so with men in the sense of, because men, good, bad, or indifferently, men's value is based on what they can produce, whether it's working for a paycheck or providing some sort of something at the house, or, the ability to fix things, whatever it is. Men are defined by that. We always have been. Now, does it fluctuate over generations? Yes, it does. But at the end of the day, society tells men, it's kind of like at work. You get 3 bereavement days. And what society tells men is, sure, you can grieve, but it doesn't need to be public. It needs to be short, sweet, and to the point. And after 3 days, you need to get back to work like you were, as if nothing happened. And grief does not work that way.
Mm-mm.
I tell men, women, young, old all the time, there is no time limit nor timeline for grief. You love that person either the majority of your life or all of their life. You're going to grieve them the rest of yours. Grief is a lifelong process. Now, is it as intense and frequent and emotion filled as it is in that first 6 months, year and a half? The farther along you get, no, it's you still have those moments, but the frequency in which you have them spreads out because you learn to get adjusted to it. You learn to carry it. You learn to do whatever you need to do for your mental health with it. So, you know, men, like when I was telling you about what I was doing while my son was actually passing away, men are taught to compartmentalize things. We are taught, well, I need to push this aside so I can help my wife, my child, help something at work, help this, help that. And then at the end of the day, after everything else is done, if I have time for me and I want to deal with it, then I can deal with it at that point. But men deal with emotion with compartmentalization, but we also deal with emotion and, we figure if we bury our head into work and ignore it, it's going to go away. It's not going to go away. Or if we bury it in a bottle, or if we do promiscuous behavior that, that's going to work out wonderfully, hashtag rolling eyes kind of thing.
Hmm.
We tend to take other physical things and cover it with it in hopes it will go away when in reality it won't. What I've tried to tell men as it relates to that is if you don't take time to work with it, it will come out at the most inopportune time possible. And so, but in a roundabout way to get back to your answer, men deal with grief and emotion quickly, short and sweet to the point, and if they can't do that, they try to cover it up with something as long as they can.
Yes, and it's very important to bring that to light. Masking it with something, as you said, that's going to come out at the worst possible time, in the worst possible way. So it does need to be more, less taboo, more mainstream for men to feel their feelings, and it is very important for you to share that. I personally have lost 8 babies to miscarriage early on, and that's what I tell a lot of people and a lot of my guests as well. Is grief never goes away, as you said. It changes though, it does, and I think personally sharing has helped me heal in ways I never
Yeah,
expected, and knowing that you're there, somebody's understanding what you're going through, you're helping somebody go through something has helped me heal in ways I never expected, so.
definitely.
Well, letters to Zachary. What led you to create letters to Zachary?
So, I'm a big proponent of therapy or counseling, whichever one would go to. And the irony right before my son had passed away, I literally had just stopped seeing my therapist. Like, a lot of people say you go through seasons of therapy, and then once you finish it, you stop seeing a therapist. And when another season comes, you start back.
Mhm.
Well, literally 2 weeks before I had called my therapist and said, hey, I don't think I've got enough to go over for an hour session, however frequently I was going at the time. I said, I think I'm going to stop doing it. Should I need it again, I'll get back on your waiting list, that kind of thing. She said, okay, wonderful. Just let me know. And so my son had passed, and like I think 2 or 3 days later, I called her up and said, "Hey, I need an emergency session. I don't really want to talk about it over the phone. I promise you, you will understand when I can talk to you. Can you fit me in?" And so she fit me in, and I started seeing her weekly for probably a year after everything had happened. And probably about 2 months in, one day she goes, well, what are you doing to get kind of your emotion out as it relates to your grief? And honestly, I forget the response I gave her, but her comment to me was, have you ever thought about journaling? And the irony of my answer now, because of what I've created, was my initial response was, excuse me, was I don't know how good of a writer I am. I don't know if that's my thing. And so she goes, well, journaling is kind of a mindfulness activity, meaning It's meant for you to get it off your shoulders and just off of you. She goes, you don't have to share it. She said you could, write it in a Word document and delete it, or you could write it physically out and like throw it away or burn it or whatever you want to do with it. And I said, okay. And so I put that on my mental back burner for probably 9 months after she suggested it to me. So I was probably been grieving for a full year before I even thought about it. And one day I was on Facebook and I was watching a reel, and honestly, I don't remember what the reel was about, but there was something in there that reminded me of my son. It may have been a theme or something, and it hit me like I was blubbering, ugly crying, just like I'd been punched in the gut. And I regained my composure and I immediately opened up a Word document, and in proper like Oxford English letter writing, I addressed a letter to my son and I verbally vomited on a page. And I don't know, to this day, I don't know the reason why I did it in a Word document and I saved it in a folder. I don't know why I did it. For something in me subconsciously said, save it in a folder for later. You're probably going to use it. And so I wrote several times a day for weeks of just how I was feeling and, how his loss was affecting me and all that kind of stuff. And so I'd become a member of a group on Facebook that dealt with grief. It was actually a very niche group. It was parents who had lost a special needs child, which I was surprised to have found because grief is a niche group, and then a special needs grief group is an even more niche group. And so I got to know the female admin very well in that group. And one day I said, excuse me, do you mind if I share a journal entry? And she goes, yes, I would love for you to, because we rarely, if never, get men in here willing to open up about emotion. And so I copied and pasted one of my letters, and right before I hit enter, I thought, am I in a mental space to share this online? Because as noble as it is, it's still the internet. And if someone disagrees with my statements in here, am I going to jump down their throat? Because in the mental space I was at a year, I would have jumped down their throat. Like I would have been out for blood is what it would have been. And in my typical fashion, I went, screw it, I'll do it anyways. And so I hit enter and didn't really think anything about it. And it was either later that evening or like the next day, all of a sudden I started getting notifications and I thought, well, buckle up, here we go. And I opened it up and I thought, please don't be negative. Please don't be negative. And it was massively popular. Like I was shocked at how popular it was. And like before the letter, I put a disclaimer and I said, look, this is my raw, open, in the moment, guttural emotions about my grief. I will not sugarcoat it. I will not tone it down. I believe that people need to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of this life experience. So if this is going to trigger you, scroll on, because, and I told some people, I said, if you're only going to make nasty comments to me, I'm telling you right now, with the mental space I'm in, the claws are going to come out. I said, so if this is something you can't handle, I will not be offended if you scroll beyond it. And the response I got from the first response I ever got, I'll never forget it. This woman I'd never met before. She goes, we've never met. Our paths have never crossed. She goes, I have never told anybody what my deep, dark emotions are related to the loss of my child. And she goes, I just read your letter. And she said, you have hit every nail on the head, exactly how I feel. That I could not have said it better. And I said, I really appreciate that it resonates with you. I said, it was inspired by my son. And I said, I'm glad that you could feel like someone gets where you're coming from. I said, unfortunately, you and I have both been there, done that. We have firsthand experience. So we both understand, we get it from a firsthand experience. And literally every letter I posted after that, I got the same kind of response. And so finally one day I go, I've got something here and I really want to build on it. How can I build on it? So I initially started a Facebook page and I was copy and pasting my letters and I was building a following. And then I would write letters and then I decided, well, I'm going to start writing like in poetic form. And then I started writing commentary and then I started doing, reels. And I mean, I'm one of those people, I like the creative process. And so I have probably 8 different ways I make material because I just like the different variations.
Mhm.
And so I initially did a Facebook page and then I started doing, Instagram because then I could do visual material. And then I kept those and then I decided I was going to start doing TikTok because, and no, excuse me, well, X now,
Oh, okay, yeah.
um, because then I could write short, sweet, and to the point kind of grief stuff. And then last but not least, I started doing TikTok because I liked the fact I could do short form video
Mhm.
on grief. And so now I'm Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok, and I have a professional website that I do all of this on. I'm also published. I have a grief coloring book
That's
that's
awesome.
that I've made for. It's more for children, but it can be for children and adults because adult coloring books have gotten popular.
Mhm.
So I've done that. The whole idea behind Letters to Zachary is to show people that it's okay to be openly vulnerable if you're in the right space. And honestly, the initial first reason why I started doing that was because I wanted to find other men that I could bounce ideas off of, and I could not find them. And I finally started going, well, let me backtrack a little bit. Men are weird creatures. They're looking for someone else to do it first, and when
Mhm.
they see that it's okay that they can do it, they'll jump on the bandwagon.
Mhm.
And so my thought process was, if you need me to be the guinea pig to take the brunt of whatever negative comments may be out there, if it gets you to open up, then I will be the guinea pig. Is kind of that was the secondary reason why I decided to do it, was because I was just like, men need to understand that it's, despite what society says and other men will tell you, it is okay to be emotionally vulnerable because those are God-given emotions. If you weren't given those if you weren't meant to use them, then you wouldn't have been given those emotions to be able to use. And so that's what I try to tell both men and women.
Yes, yes, that's very important. Yes, that's very true. That's awesome you have the coloring books. I love the adult coloring books. I'm actually in a pregnancy and infant loss group that there's a woman that creates different coloring books for different types of losses, and she has I think like 10 or 12 you can buy on Amazon. So I think it's a good way to help heal as well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I started writing as well when I lost my 3rd child. I started a blog, and it was kind of just to get my emotions out, and I didn't care who read it or what came of it. But I think writing is a really good thing to start getting some of those emotions out and starting to feel better. And you would be surprised what actually comes out and what is made of it. Like you said, you didn't think you were a good writer or anything, and that's what important. So yes.
Certainly.
How can partners support without trying to fix or rush healing?
Well, one of the other avenues in doing Letters to Zachary and just being grief support and community support is I try to teach women what it's like because I try to teach women what it's like for men to grieve in today's world because I'm not saying it is bad or better or worse, but there are just certain things that men have to overcome before they can even start grieving that
Mhm.
women don't necessarily have to. A lot of the times when I talk to women, I always preface it with, now, what I'm about to say is not a personal attack towards you as a woman. But the general consensus I get from men are from a lot of women and how they're being treated by the women that are around them. So when I say this to you, I'm not saying you personally. I'm saying this is the feedback that I'm getting from the men that are willing to open up to me. Like, the first thing I always tell women that come up to me that say, "Hey, we've lost so and so. It's been X amount of time. My husband's still not opening up. How do I get him to open up?" And I always say, the first thing I would say, you have to listen and not listen to respond. I know it seems like a simple concept, but I said, if I, as a man, am talking to you and you're waiting for me to take that one breath so that I can say something else, and you immediately jump in to either say something against how I'm feeling or how what my emotions are making you feel, then what that's subconsciously telling me as a man is that my emotions don't matter. Meaning I will always be secondary to you. You will always have primary concern. And I mean, as a sidebar, men want women to open up. We want to be able to help them. We want that, but in the rare occasion that we feel something important enough to come up to you to open up, especially those people that are not real open people, if you jump in there and do that subconscious thing, they're not going to open up because they're going to read into that of, well, my emotions don't matter as much as yours do. Um, if you, as the female counterpart to me, when you come to me and you want to vent and you expect me to sit there and just listen for whatever length of time you're venting to me about without me trying to fix it, because we all know men like to fix things. Then, on the other hand, if I'm opening up to you, I expect the same. And if you can't do that after a certain number of times, I'm going, as a man, going to get to a point to where I'm just not going to open up anymore. It's almost like baseball. It's kind of like three strikes and you're out. And so you've got that. Men have to deal with the, when it comes to other men, men have to deal with, other men comment about how I'm weak because I'm opening up, or comment that I'm gonna lose my man card because I'm opening up, or in the physical sense, talking about me, like guys talk to other men's about, manhood and all those things related to it and being lesser than because I'm using the God given emotions that were presented to me and you're chastising me for using them. From the female side, and I've even seen stuff with this in recent years. A lot of women, especially in the younger generation, you hear them online say, "Well, I want a sensitive man." Well, you get a sensitive man, and now I'm starting to see women online that are chastising those very men that you said you want a sensitive man, and now you're chastising because he's doing the very thing that you want him to do. So what you're doing is you're sending me mixed signals. Well, do you want me to open up or not want me to open up? And then, and so they want an emotionally mature man, as the key phrase would be. But when I'm actually emotionally mature, if it's more than what you think it should be, then you start ridiculing me for it. So you can't have it both ways. Now, am I saying that, we're wanting to cry on your shoulder all the time? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Some men will, but if you want us to be open, you have to give us the space to be open. Uh, you know, women ask me all the time, well, what do I need to get him to do to open up? It comes down to, your significant other well, and if you have to create a scenario where they're relaxed, whether it's watching sports, working on a car, maybe it's between some of him and his guy friends going to a college or professional sporting event. And they're just talking while they're watching
Mhm.
a sporting event, that kind of thing. So whatever that is, that's what needs to be done. And so I can't say specifically what it is because you know your significant other better than I do. But whatever those things that you can get them relaxed, it's in those relaxed moments is the most opportune time to get them to open up, is what I try to tell a lot of women.
Think that is very true, and everything you said is very spot on. I know myself personally, People come to me and I listen and stuff, but I have a tendency, especially as you said with my husband, to like I always have something to say back. So like, sometimes we need to just listen. And like you said, that makes you want to shut down and not want to continue to share because you are being made feel a certain way for being vulnerable and open. So that is very important that you share that with everybody and explain how you see it as well. So thank you so much for that. What does healing mean to you now, years later?
Um, it means it means learning better ways on how to actually carry the emotion and the grief. Um, the to give you a visual example, let's pretend that the grief that we have is about the size of a basketball, but that basketball weighs 50 pounds versus what a basketball actually weighs. In the beginning, it's tough to pick up, it's tough to hold, it's awkward to hold. You don't, you get tired holding it. You want to put it down a lot. You're weak to hold it. But after enough practice and enough training with it, you start getting a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger and a little bit stronger to where it becomes less and less awkward to hold it. Does it make it any less heavy to hold it? No, it will always be that heavy. However, as time goes on, you learn better ways to carry it so that it's you're not straining as much to be able to hold it as you're walking this journey. Is what I tell people what healing is. And what I also say to them is in the grief world, I don't tell when I tell people about, you know, moving on this journey, it's not moving on from your grief, it's moving forward with your grief,
Mhm.
is what I tell people. And in the beginning, that step forward might be a millimeter at a time. Now, at the point in which I am, it might be a step or two at a time because I'm getting to be about 4 years from the day. So I've had a lot more time than maybe someone right after the event. But what I also tell them is even if you're doing a millimeter at a time, after a year's worth of time, if you turn around and look at where you were a year ago versus where you are now, you've still moved forward with it. As long as it's moving forward, it's still moving forward. It's still progression.
Mhm.
And so don't think that you've got to walk some ridiculous distance in those initial stages. You don't have to at all. And even if you take long breaks from even walking at all, but so long as it's at points throughout that first year, you're moving little by little, that's all we're asking. And that's what healing is in the initial stages of this.
Yes, I love that analogy with the basketball and how it's always with you. It just becomes easier to carry. And it's also a good point that you said, you're going to come through times where you aren't moving at all. But as long as you're making those little steps forward, it's going to get easier and easier with time. And as we said before, it never goes away. You just learn to deal with it differently and handle it differently and use it for other outlets, such as you doing your letters for Zachary,
Mhm.
such as I'm using my podcast as a platform for me to heal and help others to be seen and share their stories on all walks of life and things that they've been through. So that's amazing. We're going to end with some rapid fire questions before I do my outro. But do you have anything else you'd like to share with us or anything else you'd like to go over today?
No, well, I would tell people if you're interested in what I'm doing, my website is letterstozachary.com, and Zachary is spelled Zachary. On my website, you can, yeah, at the bottom of the first page, you can find all my links to all my social media. If you were interested in the coloring book, I believe it's the third section down. There's an icon for it, and it'll take you directly to the Amazon page for those that are interested in it. I also have other media appearances, and I don't have a ton of other resources because I'm working on that, but I do have several other resources, and I've just got um, one of the main features of my main page is I have my entire first year's worth of entries, journal entries from my entire first year of grief that you can look at every entry. Uh, you can scroll through them. I think it's the second section down on the main page. For those that are interested that may want to see if like I've experienced it like they have.
Right.
But that's letterstozachary.com.
Okay, yeah, and I will be sure to link everything in the show notes and get any official links from you before I officially publish. That way everyone can find it easily as well. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. So we're just going to do some fun questions to lighten up the mood before we end. Are you a coffee or a tea person?
Coffee all the way. I would take coffee any way I can get it. In fact, if I could get it in IV form, I would.
I like that. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning person, one, just because I'd rather get up early and get things done and be able to relax later versus having to do them late in the night.
Hmm.
As a side note, I have sleeping issues, so that could be as early as like this morning. I woke up wide awake at 3:30 a.m.
Yeah, I understand that completely. Favorite comfort food?
Probably, I share it with my daughter. Probably hamburgers.
Nice. Always have a good hamburger. Definitely. Are you a cheese or no cheese?
Uh, any way I can get it, honestly.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah, there's probably no bad burger. Go to TV show or movie when you just want to zone out.
Oh, honestly, it really depends on the mood. I mean, I have a very vast range of things I like. Humor wise, I get my sense of humor I get from my father, which is kind of slapstick humor, oh, like the old movie Airplane or
Okay, yeah.
Spaceballs, or something that just stupid humor.
Yeah.
Is stuff that I like. On a serious note, like, one of my all-time favorites is probably Braveheart. I can
Nice.
watch that over and over and over again.
Yeah, those are all good movies. So, yeah, we gotta have a little mixture of everything in there. Like you said, depends on the mood. So, one small thing that brings you joy lately.
Um, the responses that I get from the content I create, just because doing grief content, because I've literally done grief content every day since I started doing, like, I've had no days off. And so to produce that kind of deep, difficult content every day is not easy.
Mm,
It can wear on you, but when I get the positive comments I get from it after, posting 4 or 5 different things a day, that's what kinda keeps me going.
yes, that's amazing. That's great. That is such a great feeling. I personally know that as well. It makes me feel it's kind of like a high I've never felt before, letting people share their story, knowing that they're seen. And a lot of times I've had people reach out to me. I didn't feel comfortable until I heard your story. Thank you for being so
Yeah.
honest and vulnerable. So that gets us a whole nother level there. So well, Jason, thank you so much for sharing your story, your heart, and your honesty today. What you're doing through letters to Zachary truly matters, and the space you're creating is changing lives. Conversations like this help people feel less alone and remind us that grief doesn't have a timeline or a single shape, especially for men. If this episode resonated with you, I'll have letters to Zachary linked in the show notes so you can connect and find the community. Thank you for listening, for holding space, and being part of this journey. Until next time, keep it real, keep it honest, and remember you're not alone. All right, friends, that's a wrap on today's episode of Auntie Mel Life Unfiltered. Thank you for spending this time with me and stepping into the real, the raw, the messy, and the magical, because we don't do surface level here. If this episode hit home, made you laugh, or helped you feel a little less alone, go ahead and follow the podcast and share it with someone who might need it too. And remember, you are never too much, never too little, and never alone on this wild ride. I'll meet you back here next time for more truth, more feels, and more unfiltered goodness. This is Auntie Mel signing off. Stay real, stay kind, and stay unfiltered. Thanks for hanging out with me today. This is Auntie Mel. If this episode made you laugh, think, or feel a little less alone, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Sharing it really helps this community grow. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and right here on YouTube. I'll see you in the next episode of Life Unfiltered.